Today's episode is a can't miss episode. If you work with children with autism or if you have a child with autism, I'm going to share with you 5 needle movers. These are 5 secrets to success when it comes to working with children with autism. All of these matter. You're not going to want to miss, so stay tuned to the end of this episode. Before I hop in, I want to tell you where I'm coming from today. I'm on spring break and I'm coming from Banff, Canada. Banff is one of the, if not the most beautiful place in the world I have ever been. If you haven't been there, make sure to put this on your must visit bucket list. It is so incredibly beautiful. It's considered one of the 7 wonders of the world. I put it up there with the Grand Canyon. You've got to come and explore Banff. If you're watching me on YouTube, you can see behind me the Rocky Mountains. I wanted to share that view with you. So I'm sitting in front of my hotel window and the view is amazing. There's the Rocky Mountains behind me. Well, let's dive in. The first one I'm going to go for is movement. Movement matters. So a lot of times speech pathologists, they want to jump in and they want to get right into those goals with gestures and pointing and talking and vocalizing, and that comes lastly. Before we can get into these complex fine motor goals, we have to focus on the core, the gross motor, and lastly, the fine motor. So what we're going to want to do is focus on movement. All of my activities when I'm working with children with autism have a movement component, and that movement component is a task-oriented movement component. That means they are moving their bodies independently to perform a task, to accomplish a goal. This is hugely important from the field of physical therapy and occupational therapy. In their meta-analysis, they have shown that this is the most effective way to improve motor skills, hands down. So if you want to improve the core, if you want to improve the gross, which is absolutely necessary before we can get to the speech, before we can get to those gestures, we need to incorporate movement, and the best way is through task-oriented movement activities. Don't worry if you're not a physical therapist or you're not an occupational therapist or a kinesiologist. All you need to do is know how to do it. In my SIS membership, that is what we do. Every week we have 2 movement activities because not only do they improve the motor skills, they also improve language skills, literacy skills, and most importantly, executive function. It is a way to treat the whole child and to treat multiple domains efficiently and effectively with a limited amount of time that you have. The number one and most important needle mover will be task-oriented movement activities. If you want to try them out, I would recommend my SIS membership at kellyvest.com, SIS, that's Sparkle in Speech, SIS membership, and you are going to receive 2 movement activities every single week that are ready to go. They're language rich, they're literacy rich, they're rich in treating the whole child through task-oriented movement. Number 2, most important needle mover is to be multimodal. We know that over 90% of children with autism have auditory processing challenges. So when we present language and when we have the children express themselves using language, we want to make sure to make it visual. We want to make sure to put it in print. We're going to want to make sure to use gestures. We are going to want to make sure to use our whole body movements. We're going to want to make sure to use emotion. We're going to want to make sure to use objects. Multimodal means that it is a multi-sensory experience and that the child is seeing it, the child is hearing it, the child is feeling it, the child is doing it. Language is coming alive because we realize that hearing it is not many of their strongest modality, being that there is auditory processing challenges for an overwhelming majority of children with autism. So we want to present information in a multimodal manner. Secondly, we want to give them the opportunity to express themselves multimodally. That means it's going to become really important for these children to develop literacy skills, not only so that they can read, but also that they can write, so that they can type, so that all of these great ideas within them are not locked in, but rather they can be expressed. We want to empower empower these children to have a voice. It doesn't have to be through verbal speech. It can be through writing. It can be through typing. It can be through drawing. But we need some sort of outlet that is multimodal in nature so that these children can express themselves and comprehend the world around them. We can't just rely on auditory. Number 3, the third needle mover is challenge creates change. I've talked about this before. I don't work at the word level. I don't work at the sentence level. I work at the paragraph level whenever possible. So how is that done? It's kind of like when you're stringing popcorn on a string at Christmas time, the popcorn and the cranberries, you just add it on, add it on, add it on, add it on. And we want that speech to be continuous. We don't want to be pausing from word to word to word because speech is a continuous motor activity, not a discrete motor activity. It's sort of like how you swing a golf club or swing a bat. You're not stopping every step of the way. In the same way in which we are practicing language, we want to use longer utterances that are more complex in the way we speak and our expectation for them to express themselves. When we do so, we are going to have a cascading impact in which you're going to be improving their syntax, their literacy skills using first and next and then and lastly and because, those conjunctions that are worth billions of dollars. You're also going to improving their executive function skills in which they're able to order their thoughts first, next, then, lastly, so that they can begin and complete a process. These are really important to work at a level that is longer language utterances and that are more complex in language and more diverse. So in the past, people believed that shorter utterances were better. People believed that less varied vocabulary was better. The research is abundant at this time that longer utterances are better, that a more diverse vocabulary is better. We want to create neuronal change through challenging the child, thinking about longer, more complex utterances, thinking about presenting more diverse vocabulary. When we're coming up with novel vocabulary words, simply give those 2-word explanations next to them and make it visual, make it hands-on, make it with movement and gestures, bring it to life multimodally. One thing that is really neat about vocabulary is if you use a program such as LAMP for Life on your communication device, it's organized in a way in which first you have the function, the verb, what does it do? Then after that, you have a category. What is the class of that object? And then after that, you get into the fringe. You can think of what are the features of that object and more specifically. And in doing so and expressing yourself in that manner, you're improving your vocabulary because you're understanding something by not just its name and what it looks like, but you're understanding it by its functions, by its features, by its class. So that in using the word, you're also improving the comprehension of the word. The next one we're going to look at, number 4, is embrace gestalts or gestalts, however you pronounce it. Either way, you're right, to improve speech development. So in the initial stages, we need to look at our children with autism. And if they're coming out and they're telling you songs, they're saying scripts of words like, it's time to go right now, when they want to say bye-bye. And they are using these scripts, these chunks of memorized pieces of language to express how they're feeling. They're telling you, this is how I learn language. I learn those phrases that are sung to me. I learn these phrases that are repeated over and over again, like brown bear, what do you see? I learn these phrases that are said repeatedly, such as, I'll see you later, and I hear them over and over again, or turn it to the next page. This is what is sticking. This is how I'm learning language. It's kind of like when you go to a foreign country and you pick up those words that are said continuously over and over again, and you start using those phrases. You're not really sure what you're saying, but you say, I say this phrase when I want to ask where the bathroom is. I say this phrase when I want to ask how much this costs. I say this phrase to mean that I'm having a really, really good time. I'm not really sure what I'm saying, but I've heard this phrase used in these situations, so this is what I'm parroting. Think about it that way. These are the gestalts or the gestalts. This is the sticky words that phrases that we hear over and over again, either in songs or books or in TV or in different situations. We hear them over and over again and we're repeating them, even though we're not really sure what they're saying, but we're sure that this is kind of the meaning behind them. So that is what we want to do, is we want to capitalize on those, because what we want the child to be doing is using speech on a consistent basis. So many of the kiddos I work with, their first words are saying their ABCs and their 1, 2, 3s. These are gestalts. These are gestalts. These are memorized phrases or sentences. That is wonderful, because what's happening neuronally is you're making connections between the prefrontal cortex and the cerebellum, which is saying this is how we're developing consistent speech. When speech becomes consistent, and every time that they see that letter A, they can say A, then you're going to see a big cascading impact in which they're picking up all of these other vocabulary words that they hear in the environment naturally. So gestalts are wonderful. This is how we learn our ABCs. This is how we learn our 1, 2, 3s. We memorize them at first, and then later on, they become more spontaneous and generative. So last but not least, is the most important one of all, is that relationships matter. So what I've found in working with children with autism is that they are hypersensitive to you and whether or not you like them, what your affect is. If you're frowning, they're going to take that as this is like someone that is attack mode, friend or foe. And that's because children with autism overwhelmingly have sensory challenges. Now, senses keep us safe. When you are sensory challenged, so something is off in the sensory system, you are going to feel unsafe, on edge. And when you feel unsafe, that kicks in the amygdala brain, which is the fight, flight, freeze brain. In that brain, it says, is this person friend or foe? It's really important I know this, because I feel like I'm not safe. I'm in danger right now. So they are going to pick up the eye rolls. They're going to pick up the frowns. They're going to pick up all of the communication that you've done behind their back when they're turned around, because they are in a hyper fight, flight, freeze, take in all pieces of information so that I can survive mode. Sort of like when you're at night camping and you hear a strange sound and it's dark outside and you're like, oh, what was that sound? Everything is intensified. So really thinking about how can we help this child feel safe and secure when it comes to my relationship with them, when it comes to them being in this space. We want to have predictable routines. So a lot of this comes from the area of trauma research in children who are in a fight, flight, freeze brain because of trauma. And for these children, what becomes very, very important is that we have predictable routines. So we want the children to feel safe and secure. So what I do in my task-oriented movement activities in my SIS membership is there's always the same 4-step process. We follow that every single week. We have different books that we're using. We have different songs that we're using. We have different movements and different activities, but the routine is always the same. That's very important for these children to feel safe and secure. They know what's expected of them. They know the routine so they can focus their mind, so that they can focus their emotions, so that they can use the prefrontal cortex and language and processing and higher level thinking, because the Maslow's triangle at the bottom of the base and feeling safe and secure, that is taken care of. And that's because they know what's expected. For instance, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to say that treatment target. The second thing that's going to happen is I'm going to get that sticker or the object. The third thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put that where it belongs to accomplish that goal. And the fourth thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check that checklist. That's what you're going to do, rinse and repeat over and over and over and over and over and over again. And that might seem boring, but that's what children need. They need predictability. They need to know what are the expectations of this environment, what is the routine in this environment, and that's going to make them feel safe and secure. And they have a goal to accomplish. That's going to make those dopamine levels go up, which means they're going to get out of that fight, flight, freeze brain, and they're going to remember what they're going to do, and they're going to remember it for a longer period of time. And then they're going to take the task to completion. All of that is working executive function, where you're identifying that there's a problem, you're making a plan, you're taking action, and then you're taking it to completion. That's what the task-oriented movement activities do in my SIS membership. And every week we have a different theme. The book is going to change, or the song is going to change. Maybe the movement activity is going to change. It could be a trampoline you're using one week, could be river rocks, it could be walking on a piece of tape, it could be doing a bear crawl, it could be doing a wheelbarrow. That can change the movements the children are going to do, the songs you're going to sing, or the books you're going to read. But the routine is never, ever going to change. So that is extremely important. These are the 5 needle movers if you're working with children with autism. This is what you're going to want to do if you want to create optimal change in supporting them in all areas of development. So I want you to take all of this information, roll up your sleeves, and do what you do best. Make the world a better place, one child at a time. And with me, you will always be first.